Hi, everybody. It is a remarkable day for all of us to have this one-on-one personal time with a true legend in emerging market investments, a godfather and a father of emerging markets, Mr. Mark Mobius. He has been having a phenomenal journey over the last 4+ decades at Templeton, and now, currently from 2018 onwards, he has founded Mobius Capital Partners with two of his former colleagues. The firm uses a highly specialized active investment approach with a strong emphasis in improving environment, social governance, and company culture standards across emerging and frontier market companies. And as you know, we all need to pass on to our next generations a better world. And all of us, and particularly Dr. Mobius, in the same spirit, I'm sure is doing it through the investment firm which he has founded. Before this, Dr. Mobius spent more than 3 decades at Franklin Templeton Investments. Most recently, as executive chairman of the Templeton Emerging Markets Group. Under his leadership, the group's assets under management grew exponentially from 100 million to an incredible 50 billion as he pioneered funds focused on Asia, Latin America, Africa, and Eastern Europe. As we all know, it's only now that India has wherewithal to counter the FII sales, but initially we needed that much needed capital, and people like him and more who saw the potential really helped spearhead global investments into emerging market, in turn helping our economies to get that required capital. Dr. Mobius has not only shaped investment strategies, but also contributed to developing international policies for emerging markets. He served on the World Bank's Global Corporate Governance Forum and also co-chaired its Investor Responsibility Task Force in 1999. He continues to influence governance and sustainability in markets worldwide. As accomplished academic, Dr. Mobius earned his PhD in economics and political science from MIT and has studied at some of the world's leading institutions, including Boston University, the University of Wisconsin, Kyoto University, Syracuse University, and the University in New Mexico. Dr. Mobius has been widely celebrated, winning numerous industry awards for his achievements. He has also authored a dozen books, and I'm extremely happy to share his latest book, which is on the Book of Wealth, a young investor's guide to timeless wisdom, which he has gathered over the years. I urge all of you to make sure you understand the evolution of the wealth creation as he is dated back to centuries on how the currency, the non-linkage and linkage with gold, and ultimately the wealth creation mediums have evolved. This is a young investor's guide to wealth and happiness, and make sure you read it. And I'm, of course, going to dwell on it during our conversation. I'm extremely, once again, happy, and if you permit, would like to start our conversation.
Amisha.
Pleasure, sir. Okay. Sir, as you know, 2024 marked a year where highest number of countries went for election. And people agenda, people, views were reflected in election outcomes. By choosing to vote for people or for leaders with their agendas. How do you think the election outcome, the agendas of elected people, and the change in or shift in policy making is going to have an impact in 2025 global outlook?
Well, first of all, the big change that has taken place over my lifetime has been the introduction of the incredible communications that we are now exposed to. When I was a student at MIT, I didn't have access to internet. I didn't have access to a personal computer. We couldn't do a call like this at that time. Now it's open. We have an open society globally. Despite dictatorships or different types of governments, it's becoming more and more difficult for governments around the world to hold the truth from the people. So this is the big change, and we've seen that in India. The fact that you have this wonderful president in your country who has introduced this incredible changes is because the people have spoken. They've said, look, we want something like Mr. Modi to make the changes that are necessary for the whole country. And now we're seeing it in America. The American people have spoken despite the fact that the traditional media was very much against Trump. The people spoke out very loudly and said, no, we want the truth. We want transparency. It's interesting that the prominent group that does work on corruption, the name of the group is called Transparency International, because what is needed globally is transparency, and now we're getting it. And at the sight of new words, new information, it's an incredible to see how people are being informed. And I think that's the real big revolution that's taking place globally.
Absolutely agreed, sir. And so the key election outcome, both at US and India, what kind of shift in policy making you are expecting that can happen because of the Trump administration there, and in India, a slightly lower majority in continuation, but by the Modi government? Do you expect any major policy shifts?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that you have the largest democracy in the world in India. And yes, not everybody is going to favor Mr. Modi. And the interesting thing is that you still are able to get free and fair elections. And that's happening in America now again. We're getting back to a fairer situation, a more transparent situation. Now, what does that mean? It means that the politicians will have to respond more quickly and more effectively to the will of the people. And that is a very big change that's taken place. And the fact that you have this global communication system, we can now find out what's happening anywhere in the world at the push of a button. And that means that politicians have to respond to that as well. They have to realize that their people are not being deprived of information. They have all the information, and it's up to them to make the right decisions.
So coming back and linking this changes in the election outcome to global growth, inflation, and liquidity and interest rate outlook, what are your views for 2025? How do you think some of these can pan out? Of course, we will talk. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Of course, you must remember that America still leads because the US dollar is still the international currency, despite the fact that the Chinese and others want to change that situation. But the reality is that the US dollar is the free international currency. So whatever happens in the US is going to impact the world. And a number of things are happening. First of all, the election has resulted in a revolution in the way the American government is going to be operated. As you know, Trump is now intent on cutting down the size of government and cutting down the bureaucracy, because he learned that, when he made these big tax cuts during his previous government, he talked to businessmen and asked them, do you think this tax cut was good for you? And the businessmen said, yes, it was very good, but more importantly was the regulation. The fact that you cut down on the regulatory framework of the government so that we were not encumbered by this bureaucracy was more important than the tax cut. So now that message is very loud and clear. And he's going to be going after these people in the government to make the government more efficient and less intrusive. And that's going to have a big impact, not only in the US, but it will be a demonstration effect for the rest of the world. Because if he is able to pull it off, and if the results are good, in other words, higher economic growth in America, other countries are going to look at that and say, hey, maybe we should be doing the same thing. So it's going to have a global impact.
So we at India under Mr. Modi has been trying continuously over last 2 terms, so almost a decade, to get rid of obsolete laws, get rid of bureaucracy, bring efficiency, and also keep a hawk eye on the entire administration at government level, particularly central level, to make sure it works more and more efficiently to support businesses and people within India. And I'm very happy that the similar thing, when it is being reflected in world's largest economy, will have its a lot more ripple impact. Having said that, what's your outlook on global growth? Of course, we start with US. We also look at key economies, particularly Japan and China, and then back home at India. How's your growth outlook for 25?
Well, by the way, we have to really honor Mr. Modi, because his job is much more difficult than Trump's. Because in America, at least, you have a country that's fairly uniform. I mean, everybody speaks English. Everybody has the same culture, generally speaking. But in India, you have a diverse culture, different languages, different states. And Modi's challenge is much, much greater than any other democracy in the world. So you have to
totally agree, sir.
He's done a terrific job. Now, what's going to happen? As a result of the Trump reforms, you're going to see economic growth in America increase. You're going to see a much more prosperous America. That is going to have a global impact. Now, a lot of people say, oh, Trump is going to introduce all these tariffs. Those tariffs will not all be introduced. Why? Because they will be used as a bargaining chip with countries around the world who've restricted trade with the US. So Trump will sit down with these countries and say, look, you have been restricting us from importing this or that or exporting this or that. Let's now talk about more open trade. And if we're able to reach an agreement, I'm not going to increase the tariffs. So that is going to be a very important impact on global trade, because I believe that despite the talk about higher tariffs, the result will be greater international trade, more traffic in goods and services around the world, which will be good. Now, as you know, China is going to be hit by Trump, according to his promises, with a much higher tariff. What will be the impact? Well, the impact is already being felt. The Chinese, anticipating these restrictions, have already diversified their manufacturing base. So they're building factories in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in India, in other parts of the world. So the impact, oddly enough, is going to be very beneficial for the emerging countries around the world, because these Chinese factories will enhance the economic growth of these countries. Now, for China, it will mean investment income will be very good because they will continue indirectly to be exporting to the US. So the impact of these Trump measures, I think, are going to be quite beneficial globally. And I think you're going to probably see global growth growing. In addition, there is the matter of war around the world. As you know, Trump
Exactly.
said that he wants to stop all these wars. And already things are happening without him even taking office. It looks like the Ukraine-Russia situation will be winding down. We've already seen what's happening in Syria. That will be a big, big change in the Middle East, because it means that Iran will be much weaker in exporting revolution into the Middle East. So all of these effects are going to have a big, big impact globally again, which will be beneficial.
So in the light of these geopolitical risk subsiding a bit, global growth outlook increasing because of policy intervention, negotiation, etc. Do you think that, how do you think the commodities to behave? And let's divide these commodities into gold, the precious metal, oil, and rest of the ferrous and non-ferrous metals. How do you think, what will be the key factors determining the outlook for these three commodities?
Well, if you look at the US dollar price of these commodities, you must really realize that the US dollar has depreciated in value as a result of money printing. Money supply in America during the COVID period went up by 30, 40%. And that means the devaluation of the currency by that amount. So if you see higher commodity prices, it's really not necessarily a function of supply and demand, but a function of the dollar depreciation. So that's one thing. The other thing, of course, is as economic growth expands, the demand for commodities will increase.
Exactly.
So there will be also a upward push, not only as a result of a depreciated US dollar, but also as a result of demand, higher demand. So I believe gold prices, silver prices, you've already seen prices of coal go up dramatically. Oil prices will continue to do quite well, despite the fact that the Americans are going to be increasing their production of oil. The demand for power around the world is not diminishing. I mean, if you look at India alone, 1.2 billion people want more power.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants to have an electric vacuum, electric refrigerator, electric rice cooker, et cetera, et cetera. So demand for power will not diminish, it will increase. So these commodities will probably do quite well. Now, I'm not recommending people invest in commodities directly, but keep that in mind when you're looking at companies, their costs will continue to increase.
Correct. So, sir, having this positive outlook on the global growth for 2025, and I'm sure that will have its rub-off impact on US markets to start with, which we have started seeing in last quarter of this 24. How do you think the fund flow, the global investable surplus will shift or will find value, whether in developed markets, largely US, emerging markets, and in the context of emerging markets between China and India in next year?
Well, first of all, you must remember, if we see better growth in America, greater wealth in America, that wealth will have to find its home someplace to invest. Now, The American market, of course, already is an international market. One of the reasons why the new fund that I'm starting is not called Emerging Markets Fund, but Emerging Opportunities, because we found that there are a lot of emerging market opportunities in America, because so many of these American companies are investing and getting their earnings from emerging countries. So that's one aspect that we have to keep in mind. The other aspect, of course, is that more and more American investment will find its way into emerging countries, because there's a limit to how much they would want to put into the American market. So I expect more inflows into India and to other emerging market countries. Now, if things begin to turn out better in China, if China is able to reach an agreement with the US, which I think they will, then I believe the Chinese market will also do better than it has been doing up to now. But India, of course, will still be the leader in terms of growth.
Absolutely. So you must have observed that in last 1 or 2 quarters, the corporate earnings in India are getting more and more timid. And post-COVID, which as a country, I'm very proud to say that our administration, both at the center as well as RBI, managed exceedingly well. But the recovery post-COVID has been very K-shaped. The rural demand didn't come back the way it should have come back, supporting the total GDP growth. And up till now, from COVID till now, it's been largely the government capex, which has been growing at more than 20%, which has kept the engine thriving. So we are at a stage where the rural economy has not fully bounced back. Urban growth has been slightly slowing down. And in terms of our capex growth, we might do the same capex, but our capex growth may not be from government budgets same, because the election outcome somewhere or other showed that little popular measures are also seeping in across states and in center. In the light of that, what do you think are the core reasons that India's growth as well as corporate growths are slightly tapering down? And what do you think what are the factors that will take it back again?
Well, first of all, you must remember that 7% growth is incredible growth. I don't know what the recent numbers are, but that kind of growth is incredible.
Yeah, latest quarter as compared to about 6.45, 6.5% expectation, our GDP number came at close to 5.6, 5.7%.
Right.
And corporate earnings have also just been slightly more flattish.
Yes. You must remember, when we look at these growth numbers, we're looking at what we're seeing now compared to what was last year, I think year on year, right?
Yes.
Now, last year, the numbers were very high. So when you get a slight decline currently, the percentage numbers look bad. The
Yeah, but
numbers
overall size is still big.
Yeah. But overall, it's still incredible. But you must remember that from a longer term point of view, what is happening in India? First of all, the rural people are moving to the cities. More and more people will be in big cities in India going forward. That's a big, big trend. And that's the reason, by the way, why infrastructure spending will have to continue to increase. There may be a slight slowdown, but the reality is that they will have to continue infrastructure spending in a big, big way.
Correct.
I've had the pleasure of traveling around India and visiting the different airports, and I've been so impressed by these airports. They've done a terrific job, but still lots of roads, bridges, dams, other infrastructure has to be done, or more has to be done. So I don't think that will be slowing down to any great extent. There may be slight changes, but generally speaking, that will continue. The other thing with the urbanization it means that there'll be much greater demand for goods and services, and for transportation, and for all the other items that take place in cities. So the consumer population and consumer goods demand will keep on increasing, which will be very important for the country. Finally, and probably most importantly, Indians will begin to travel. You know, one of the other things when I visited India earlier this year, I was amazed by the crowds of Indian tourists, not foreign tourists, but Indian tourists visiting all these sites around India. That will increase. And there's going to be an incredible demand for infrastructure to handle these tourists. Because I saw lines and lines of people. You know, we were in Delhi and there were lines of people to see these different events. So
Correct.
that is going to be another big factor going forward. And that means, of course, great opportunities for business.
But just to collaborate and support the point that you are making, that this rise of social media, particularly Instagram and Facebook and so on, and the entire Zen Alpha, Zen Millennium, whatever we call, have in India has also become very experiential. From our earlier generations, we were very hoarders. We wanted safety, we wanted savings. And this generation shows that they want to live life today also, not only for tomorrow. So yes, you are very right. And COVID gave them, and post-COVID gave them an idea that within India, travel and experiencing is also something to look forward to. So you're absolutely right. That entire segment of experiencing has been doing very well in India. Sir, having understood that, the kind of outlook, what you must have also read and must be observing that quite a few sectors, this government has been attempting to make India Aatmanirbhar, we call it in Hindi, which means self-reliant or own manufacturing. And one of the biggest sector within that has been defense, where a shift in policy making, shift in ordering system, and also shift for foreign companies that how they should collaborate and technology transfer with Indian companies have led to continuous rising order books for defense sector. So also there, as you said, are revamping the entire rail infrastructure in India, and also the port and shipping. Some of these things, which are happening in infrastructure, and there is this PLI that you must be aware that there are special supports which are given to industries in the initial years to become globally competitive, which has started bearing its fruit. And you feel that the global growth will grow up because of the Trump administration. How would you structure your portfolio if it is an India dedicated portfolio in terms of sectors, themes for 25?
Well, I think it's very important what you mentioned about how in the defense industry, things have been expanding very much because one thing about India, the advantage that India has is it's a big country. It's a big population. And that means that they can begin to produce goods and services for their own population, which are world scale. In other words, they don't even have to export. They can still build very big factories, have an incredible variety of goods and services. So and that goes for the defense industry. So what's going to happen as the wealth increases, as the government budget increases, the size of the defense industry will increase. And that means they will be able to not only produce for the local demand, but for export. So you're going to see a lot of exports of these products and services to other parts of the world. Now, already they've demonstrated that they're able to do this in the software industry. You know, if you look at companies like Infosys or Tata consulting, you'll see they're all over the world. They're global. I was very surprised. I was in Chile a few years ago, and I was visiting a department store in the Chilean capital, Santiago. And as I was going through the offices, I saw boxes with Tata written on them. I said, "What's that doing here?" They said, "They're doing all our software for the department store." So that gives you an idea that, the incredible reach of Indian industry is there. Now, it's been in software mainly because the previous governments restricted exports to such a great extent. It was so difficult for Indian companies to do exports that they went into software, because that software is something you you can't easily restrict. But that's going to change. You're going to see a lot of products, hardware, not only software, being exported. But probably the most significant change I think you're going to see in India is the development of the semiconductor industry. Up to now, a lot of people have said, "Oh, only America, only Taiwan, only Korea can do this chip production, semiconductors." But I believe, and I'm certain, that India will be able to do the same, as good as, if not better, than these other countries. And now that means some freeing up of imports of vital machinery to do this work, and I think that's going to happen. So now already the software for chip production is being done in India.
Exactly.
Many of the largest companies in the world use software engineers in India for their software. Now the hardware will come in, and that will be a very, very important component for India going forward.
I totally agree with you, sir. And to dwell down a bit more, before I take up the real lessons you have learned during your journey and what have been those defining moments, your one last key call on 2025, what should investors expect would be the kind of return trajectory, and where should they remain invested? Large cap, mid cap, small cap? How should they really look at Indian markets?
Generally speaking, I don't differentiate or recommend you concentrating on any particular sector or size of companies, but
Okay.
Our experience has been the mid cap are usually the good ones to look at. Why is that? First, they're big enough to have liquidity. You must have liquidity, because if you change your mind or you have to move, you have to be able to sell the shares that you're in. But more importantly, the mid cap and the small cap are not recognized by most analysts. They're not heavily researched. So if you find these companies, you can do your own research and have some advantage over the big investors. So I think that's probably a good way to look at it. In other words, try to get an edge in investing by going after the companies that are not recognized by others and not being heavily researched. Now, in terms of sectors, I, again, would not say only software, only hardware, only consumer, only commodities. No. What I would say is that look at the company first. First, are they using technology to improve their productivity and efficiency? That's one of the first questions we ask when we look at a company. And what is their return on capital? Is it high? Finally, how much debt do they have? Try to avoid companies with heavy debt. So if you follow these general principles, you probably end up with companies that are fairly good that you could look at. Now, after you've done all that work, then you have to get to know the management, get to know the owners of the company. What is their approach to life? How are they treating their employees? How are they looking at the environment? How are they looking at the social fabric of their community? These are factors that have a big impact, and you can reduce risk by looking at these factors to ensure they're not going to get into trouble as a result of some environmental damage or some problem they're having with the community or with their own workers. So if you found all these general principles, you can have a lot of freedom to look at thousands of companies around the world.
Certainly, sir. Thank you so much for this last bit of advice, which is going to be very useful. But before I open the floor for the audience to ask a few questions and also my fellow colleagues, over your decades and decades of investments journey, what have been some of the key successes where you had a very, which made a huge difference in your approach, in your career, in your size of money that you made for investors? What have been those opportunities?
Well, I think the most important aspect has been as a result of my visits to companies, because very often you will look at the balance sheet, you look at the profit and loss numbers, you read about the company in the popular press, but only when you visit the company do you get a real insight. And I remember many years ago, we were visiting a company in China, and when we were touring the factory, I noticed that the equipment was very high caliber, very high technology they were using. And I began to think to myself, gee, that's very interesting. I didn't realize that they would be using such equipment from Germany, from all over the world, and also from China, of course. And I thought to myself, this company is probably going to do fairly well going forward. And we invested. They were doing the gears for the wind power products.
Too.
And we did very well. And I repeated that idea in my investing around the world, and this has worked out very well. So visiting and understanding the company is very important and results in good investments.
Certainly, sir. And there is one query from the audience, and which was also on the top of my mind, as to what are your views on crypto? Because in your book also, you have seen the entire history of currency and the play between the paper currency and the currency backed by commodity, and now this cryptocurrency. How are you seeing the evolution and outlook?
The crypto revolution is quite amazing, and it's a product of the young generation. We have a new generation of people who are beginning to, as a result of the internet, understand more about money and about what's happening to money and why currencies are devaluing. And they are searching for something different. In other words, they're saying, hey, why is the US dollar devaluing? And they begin to understand that it's because of money printing, because of devaluation, deliberate devaluation by governments around the world. And they wanted an alternative. So they came up with the crypto. And of course, Bitcoin has been an incredible rise and is now reaching the highest point ever before in its history. And more people are beginning to say, yes, this is a very good alternative to the US dollar or to other currencies. So they're using it as an investment. In fact, I was surprised when the Federal Reserve Chairman said that crypto or Bitcoin is like gold. Of course, it isn't. It's quite different from gold, but it's interesting that a central banker said something like that. So this is a big challenge to central banks around the world, because the people, particularly the young people, are beginning to challenge these central banks. So this revolution in crypto is not going away anytime soon. It will continue. However, I think there'll be a reaction on the part of central banks. They are all looking at digital currencies, their own digital currencies, central bank digital currencies. In fact, we're writing a book on that subject right now. Every central bank around the world is looking at some form of digital currency because they realize they must compete with crypto.
Correct.
They will not compete unless they are able to control money supply, because that will be the secret to them having a real currency that is valuable and is trusted around the world.
But sir, constraining the money supply will have its own huge repercussions in the short term, in terms of all these asset classes which were chased by this increased money supply, which maybe are at a slightly inflated levels for all you know. So that opens a completely different Pandora's box as to how to really handle that, isn't it?
Exactly. Well, you know, in my book, I wrote a book on inflation. I call it The Inflation Myth and the Wonderful World of Deflation. And in the book, I said, look, the numbers that are being used to measure inflation are false. They're not very accurate. Inflation is much higher than the numbers show because of this money supply situation. But I also said that we are in a deflationary world. And of course, when you mention this to economists, they hate that word, deflation. They think it's a very evil thing. But the reality is, because of technology, goods and services are actually getting cheaper in terms of real earning power. And that's a wonderful thing that we're living in right now. We're living in a world with incredible opportunities and a lower cost, real cost of living.
Correct. So two defining things which are going to have its impact are also the robotics on manufacturing, and of course topped up by AI. So what are your views, and how are you looking at businesses adopting, employment generation getting impacted, and how are you shielding those or embracing that in your portfolio?
Well, you know, AI, they call it artificial intelligence. And I say that there's nothing artificial about it, and then there's nothing intelligent about it. Because artificial, it's basically what I call it accelerated information. What AI is the gathering of people's information that's created by people around the world at a very rapid pace, and combining it and analyzing it and putting it out again as something that is reasonable for people to read. So this accelerated information flow is getting better and better as a result of chip production, as a result of semiconductors that are getting more and more powerful. So that is really what's happening. And of course, it's going to be a wonderful thing going forward. It's going to help us tremendously. Already, I use AI to get information, to gather things from all over the world, which would take hours if I did it myself. So this is something that's going to be a boon to everyone else.
Absolutely. And how do you embrace that in your portfolio? Company selection or...
Yes, every company that we are looking at is subject to an AI investigation. We go into the AI site and say, what about this company? What are people saying about this company? What about the industry? What are the growth rates, et cetera, et cetera. So we get a lot of information that way, but it does not replace our own on-the-ground investigation.
Correct. Shall I open the floor for question and answer? Amisha, are you going to take that? Who's taking it up?
Yes, ma'am, I will take it up.
Please do that.
Yeah, hi, Mark. Amnish from PL. So I will be coordinating Q&A on behalf of audience. So we have one question which has come from audience, which is with regards to energy transition. As you will be aware that Donald Trump, the president-elect of US, is in favor of fossil fuels. So what happens to the entire energy transition you can say, concept which is growing globally, and how does that change? Will it change, or how does things happen on that front now?
Well, yes, as you know, Trump has said he wants to pump. He wants to dig for more and more oil, and wants to make America totally energy independent. And I think that will happen. In fact, they're well on the way to do that. Now, these fossil fuels, of course, are the subject of a lot of debate. A lot of people don't want to use fossil fuels because of the pollution, because of the global warming problem, etc. The reality is, as I mentioned earlier, the demand for energy is not going down. It's going up. And particularly in India, the demand is incredible. So yes, there will be room for solar, for wind, for hydro, for nuclear, but the efficiency of coal-fired and oil-fired and gas-fired power plants are such that the demand in those areas will continue to increase going forward. Now, as a percentage of the total energy pie, those amounts will get smaller, but actual growth will continue because the entire energy pie is increasing and growing.
Correct. You're mute, Amish.
Yeah. Mark, our next question is on the, you can say, as you said, that the US growth rates are going to improve. And now if US looks at cutting its debt, cutting the amount of the treasuries it is having, then what will happen to dollar in terms of, say, its global standing, and what will have the impact on the overall global currency trade?
Well, as you know, the dollar has already increased against almost every currency around the world. And that's an anticipation of what Trump is going to be doing going forward. And I believe the dollar will probably get somewhat stronger if he is successful in the policies that he's pursuing. What does that mean? It means, of course, against other currencies will get weaker. Now, that's not a bad thing for these other currencies because these currencies will become more competitive. So exports from those countries will go into the US and Europe at a much faster pace. So I would not say that it's a cause for alarm. It's probably a beneficial thing for particularly the emerging countries around the world. Now, of course, they also have to be aware that they can't allow their currency to get too weak as a result of money printing. They have to be very much aware of ensuring that their money supply does not increase too rapidly, which would devalue their currencies. But nevertheless, their currencies will become much more competitive against the US dollar and probably the euro.
Yeah. So in the same context, what is the outlook on gold, and should the allocation to gold be increased?
I think everyone should have some gold in their portfolios. Now, a lot of people are treating crypto, Bitcoin, as the equivalent of gold. That's fine. I personally do not go for the crypto. I prefer gold, physical gold. So gold should be a very important part of your portfolio. And by the way, one of the things that's happening is the Indian demand for gold is something that has a big impact globally. Because as you know, with 1.2 billion people and the love of gold by Indian people, the demand for gold will continue to increase going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. We have next question, which is on the digital public infrastructure, which relates to UPI, Aadhaar, e-governance, e-verification, etc. So India is one of the leaders over there. And what sort of scope do you see in these kinds of services in India going forward?
Yes, you know, India is really the leader. The central bank in India, by creating a digital payment system, is really leading the world. First central bank to do this sort of thing. And I think a lot of other central banks will follow this lead because they're competing with crypto, and they have to do something. And I mentioned the introduction of central bank digital currencies will be coming, but more importantly, a payment system that is efficient and low cost is going to be something that will be very, very important for countries around the world. And of course, in India, it's had a big impact already, and it's had great savings for the consumers in India.
Yeah, Mark, our next question is on the supply chain. With the Trump now likely to be, you can say, sworn in next month, and there is likely to be some clampdown in terms of more tariffs, etc. So, do you see a complete disruption in the global supply chains?
Well, already it's happened. A lot of companies around the world, if not all, have anticipated this situation. Of course, you must remember that the tariffs on China have already been implemented by the previous administrations. So the trade situation with China forced more and more companies to diversify their supply chain. And of course, during COVID, a lot of these companies were very hurt as a result of the disruption of supply chains. So these companies are now have learned their lesson and have diversified their supply chain dramatically around the world, and of course in the US as well. So I think the impact of supply chain disruption will not be as great as people expect, because so many companies have already anticipated it and made changes.
Thanks, Mark. Now I hand over to Mrs. Amisha Vora for her final remarks and any questions if she has.
So I'm told that we are supposed to end the session in next 8 minutes at sharp 1:30. And these 5 to 6 minutes, you need to share with all of us what have been those basic disciplines, your life mantras, which has helped you being so fit and healthy throughout your journey.
Well, thank you. I must say that I feel very good, but I would not say that I'm the picture of great health, although I do feel good. I don't have any major illnesses. But one of the most important things, and if you talk to health experts around the world, you'll find that the most important thing is exercise. You have a body, you have to use it. The saying goes, if you don't use it, you will lose it. We have a body and we have to use it. So every morning I get up and I exercise. I get on a bicycle, read a book, look at the TV, look at my phone, and do a half hour of exercise. The other thing I do is a few times a week, or maybe if I can every day, do some weight training. Because as you get older, you lose the muscle mass and your bones get weaker as a result. So you have to put pressure on your muscle structure and your bones. So that's the first thing, exercise, number one. Secondly, of course, I try to watch my diet, but I have a weakness for sweets. So I'm trying to get rid of a lot of the sweets in my life, but still it's a real problem. It takes a lot of discipline. And I try to cut down on the amount that I eat. The third thing is that, of course, I take vitamins. I take multivitamins. I take the Indian herb ashwagandha, which is very good. And I take other types of medicine that I read about. One of the wonderful things about the internet now is that you can learn about new developments in medicine. And one of the most interesting things is metformin, which is a diabetic pill, actually is found to lengthen your life. So metformin is something that I'm taking now because even though I don't have diabetes, it has a good effect on your life. So these are the things you have to learn and learn more about on the internet, because new discoveries are being found every day. So these are the lessons that I've learned over the years. But I think finally, and most importantly, you have to look forward. In other words, be optimistic, look forward to the things that are good things that are happening in your life, be optimistic. And by the way, as a stock investor, as an investor in the market, you have to be optimistic. Because at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
bull markets go up more than bear markets go down. So if you're in the market and you're optimistic, you're probably going to do very well.
Absolutely, sir. The last line makes all the sense that bull markets make you much more than bear markets can get you down. So do not
Exactly.
worry. And as you know, India is at the cusp of financialization of savings. And we've been seeing across the length and breadth of India how people from all strata of society are now gradually putting money into equity through mutual funds, SIPs, direct equity. And this is the basic mantra for them, that they should look at the bull markets, how they can help them convert their savings into wealth over a longish period. So this has been an excellent 1 hour invested with you, learning from you. And I hope you also enjoyed spending this time with us.
Well, thank you very much, Amish. It's been great. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I'm also looking forward to doing that.